She had 3 seconds to decide. Pepper spray the stranger holding sunflowers at her door or let him in and risk everything. The text wasn't meant for him. Just a simple mistake. Wrong contact, wrong message, wrong timing. There's wine and I'm terrible at assembling furniture. Come save me. Sent at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday to someone whose number she didn't even recognize. But Ethan Cole showed up anyway. Not just any stranger. A billionaire CEO who hadn't laughed in months. Who'd spent years building an empire at the cost of his own humanity. Who saw her accidental message and thought, maybe this is permission to be someone else. Just for one night, he brought Belgian chocolates. She almost slammed the door. Instead, Ava Morgan made a choice that would cost her everything she thought she wanted, and give her everything she didn't know she needed. Because 6 months later, she'd be standing in a boardroom facing his stepmother's ultimatum. Take $50,000 and disappear, or watch her career burn while the man she loved chose his company over her heart. But that night, the night of the wrong text, none of that had happened yet. That night, she just had to decide whether to trust a stranger who showed up because a typo made him remember what hope felt like. Some mistakes look like destiny. This one looked like danger, and she opened the door anyway. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and cardboard dust. Ava Morgan stood in the middle of apartment 3B, surrounded by moving boxes that hadn't been labeled properly. Somewhere in the chaos was her coffee maker, and she needed it desperately. The hardwood floors creaked under her feet, unfamiliar and cold. She'd left her old life in Chicago 2 weeks ago. Left the magazine job that paid well but crushed her soul. Left the friends who only called when they needed something. Left the version of herself that said yes to everything and meant none of it. Boston was supposed to be different, quieter. Hers. She pulled out her phone, squinting at the screen. Her best friend Claire had texted 3 times asking for the new address. Ava typed it quickly, 3B Marlborough Street, then added a second message without thinking. There's wine and I'm terrible at assembling furniture. Come save me. She hit send. The phone buzzed immediately. Wrong Claire, she realized, stomach dropping. The message had gone to a contact she didn't recognize, someone whose number she must have saved months ago and forgotten. Before she could type an apology, 3 dots appeared. Then, on my way. What kind of wine? Ava stared at the screen. The response was polite, confident, completely serious. She typed back fast. Sorry, wrong number. Please ignore. The dots appeared again, too late. Already left. If you've ever sent a text to the wrong person and had them actually show up, hit subscribe and let us know in the comments what happened. 23 minutes later, someone knocked. Ava froze, holding a box cutter mid-slice through packing tape. She wasn't expecting anyone. Claire was still at work. The landlord had explicitly said he wouldn't be available until Monday. The knock came again. Calm. Patient. Not the frantic hammering of a delivery driver running late. She walked to the door slowly. Checked the peephole. A man stood in the hallway. Tall and sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her entire moving truck. He was holding a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a box of chocolates in the other. His expression somewhere between amused and cautious. Ava opened the door 6 inches. Keeping the chain lock engaged, can I help you? You texted me, he said simply. His voice was low, controlled, like someone used to boardrooms and conference calls. You said you had wine and needed saving. Her brain stuttered. That was a mistake. Wrong number. I know. He held up the sunflowers. But I was already out, and you sounded like you were having a rough day. Thought I'd take a chance. She should have closed the door. Should have thanked him politely and sent him away. Instead, she heard herself say, that's either extremely kind or extremely weird. Probably both. He shifted the chocolates slightly. I'm Ethan Cole, and before you ask, no, I don't usually show up at strangers' apartments. But your message made me laugh, and I haven't done that in about 4 months. There was something in the way he said it. Tired, honest, like he'd just admitted something he hadn't meant to. Ava looked at the sunflowers again. They were real, not the grocery store kind. Someone had wrapped them carefully in brown paper and twine. She unhooked the chain. Ava Morgan, she said, stepping back. And if you're a serial killer, just know I have pepper spray and a very loud voice. Noted. Ethan stepped inside, glancing around at the boxes and half-assembled furniture. He didn't look uncomfortable, just curious, like he was cataloging details. You just moved in? 2 hours ago. She took the sunflowers, searching for something to use as a vase. I don't even have cups yet. Or a coffee maker. Or any idea what I'm doing. He set the chocolates on the kitchen counter, which was cluttered with takeout menus and a single plate. What brought you to Boston? Terrible life choices and a desire to start over. Ava found a mason jar under the sink, filled it with water. You? I live here, work here. Haven't left in a while. The way he said haven't left carried weight, like someone who'd forgotten how. She arranged the sunflowers in the jar, aware that he was watching her. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to solve a puzzle. So, she said carefully, do you make a habit of rescuing people who text the wrong number? First time. He loosened his tie slightly. But I figured worst case you slam the door. Best case I meet someone who drinks wine alone on a Tuesday and admits they're bad at furniture. It's Wednesday. Even better. Ava laughed before she could stop herself. It surprised her. The sound felt rusty, like she hadn't used it properly in months. Ethan smiled, just a flicker at the corner of his mouth, and suddenly the apartment didn't feel quite so empty. Okay, she said, gesturing at the half-assembled bookshelf leaning against the wall. You brought chocolates. The least I can do is let you prove you're better at IKEA instructions than I am. Deal. He shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it over a box. Underneath, his shirt was crisp white, the sleeves already rolled to his elbows like he'd done this before. Like he knew how to shift from boardroom to bookshelf without hesitation. For the next hour, they worked in surprisingly comfortable silence. Ethan read the instructions out loud in a deadpan voice that made the Swedish translation sound like a dramatic screenplay. Ava handed him screws and bolts, occasionally making sarcastic commentary about the engineering logic of particle board. When the bookshelf finally stood upright, sturdy, level, miraculously intact, she opened the wine. It was cheap. The kind that came with a twist-off cap. Ethan didn't comment. They sat on the floor, backs against the newly assembled shelf, and drank from mismatched mugs she'd found in a box labeled Kitchen Misk. So, Ava said, studying him over the rim of her mug, what do you actually do, Ethan Cole? He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. I run a company. What kind of company? The kind that's very boring to talk about at parties. She raised an eyebrow. Try me. Tech acquisitions. Due diligence. Corporate restructuring. He took a sip of wine. I spend most of my time in meetings, reading contracts, and making decisions that affect people I'll never meet. Sounds lonely. It is. He said it matter-of-factly, like stating the weather. But it pays well, and I'm good at it, so I keep doing it. Ava set down her mug. That's the saddest thing I've heard all week. What about you? He asked, deflecting smoothly. What terrible life choices brought you here? I worked at a magazine in Chicago. Wrote listicles about skincare and celebrity gossip. My editor told me I had potential, but kept assigning me articles about which Kardashian wore it better. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. I wanted to write real stories, things that mattered. But every pitch got rejected, and eventually I realized I was just waiting for permission, for someone to tell me I was good enough. And now I'm freelance, broke, living in a half-furnished apartment and drinking wine with a stranger who may or may not be a corporate robot. Ethan laughed. A real one this time, low and surprised. Corporate robot. That's new, am I wrong? No. He leaned his head back against the shelf. But I'm working on it. The apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic outside. Ava glanced at her phone, 9:47 p.m. They'd been talking for over 2 hours. I should let you go, she said, not moving. Probably. Ethan didn't move either. They sat there for another 10 minutes, finishing the wine and saying nothing. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like the first easy breath Ava had taken in months. When Ethan finally stood to leave, he paused at the door. Thank you for not pepper spraying me. Thank you for the sunflowers, she smiled. And the furniture skills. He handed her a business card. Simple, expensive cardstock with just a name and number. In case you ever need saving again. Ava looked at the card, then at him. Ethan Cole, CEO, she read aloud. You really buried the lead there. I was enjoying being just Ethan. He met her eyes. It's been a while. After he left, Ava stood in the doorway for a long moment, holding the card and trying to remember the last time someone had shown up, really shown up, when she didn't even know she needed them to. Ethan texted her the next morning at 7:15 a.m. Coffee? There's a place 2 blocks from you that doesn't make terrible decisions with espresso. Ava stared at her phone, still half asleep. She'd assumed last night was a one-time thing, a strange accidental kindness that would fade into a good story she'd tell at parties. But here he was again, offering coffee like they were friends. She typed back, "How do you know where I live?" "You told me your address, 3B Marlborough. I have an excellent memory. That's either charming or restraining order territory. I'm leaning toward charming." 8 a.m., she should have said no. Should have recognized that normal people don't befriend strangers who show up at their door with flowers. But Ava had spent the last 6 months living carefully, saying no to everything that felt uncertain, and look where that had gotten her. Fine, but you're buying. The coffee shop was small and warm, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a dry cleaner. Ethan was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cappuccinos and a bag of croissants. He looked different in daylight, less formal, more human. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd skipped his usual routine. "Morning," he said, sliding one of the cups toward her. "You're annoyingly punctual." Ava sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. Occupational hazard. He broke a croissant in half, offering her the larger piece. "How's the apartment?" "Still half unpacked. But the bookshelf is holding strong." They fell into easy conversation, the kind that shouldn't have existed between 2 people who'd met less than 24 hours ago. Ethan asked about her writing. She told him about the novel she'd been avoiding for 3 years. She asked about his company. He admitted he'd built it from scratch after his father died and left him nothing but debt and a dying business. "I was 26, he said quietly, angry, determined to prove everyone wrong. "Did you?" "Yes, but I'm not sure it was worth what I gave up." Ava wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression stopped her. A wall that hadn't been there before. Instead, she said, "So why did you really show up yesterday?" Ethan looked at her directly. "Because your text made me remember what it felt like to want something spontaneous. And I haven't wanted anything spontaneous in a very long time." The honesty disarmed her. "That's a terrible reason." "I know," he smiled faintly. "But here we are. Over the next 2 weeks, here we are became a pattern. Coffee 3 times a week. Lunch twice. One dinner at a small Italian place where Ethan insisted on ordering in broken Italian, and the waiter played along with exaggerated patience. They texted in between. Random observations, book recommendations, photos of terrible office coffee. Ava knew it was strange. Knew her friends back in Chicago would have a field day analyzing it. But she also knew that Ethan listened when she talked. Really listened. Not the performative nodding most people did while waiting for their turn to speak. And then, 3 weeks after the wrong text, Ethan's world crashed into hers. They were having coffee, their usual spot, usual time, when a woman approached the table. She was elegant, mid-50s, wearing a cream-colored suit that screamed old money and careful control. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were calculating. "Ethan." The woman's voice was smooth, practiced. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ethan's expression shifted, closed off, guarded. "Margot, aren't you going to introduce me?" Margot's gaze slid to Ava, appraising her like a piece of furniture that didn't match the decor. "Ava Morgan, this is Margot Hale, my stepmother." Ava extended her hand. Margot shook it briefly, her grip cool and precise. "Charming," Margot said, though her tone suggested otherwise. She turned back to Ethan. "We need to discuss the Parker acquisition. Your assistant said you've been avoiding calls. I'll handle it Monday." "Ethan, this is a $40 million deal. You can't—" "I said Monday, Margot." The tension was sharp enough to cut. Margot's smile tightened. "Of course. Enjoy your coffee." She left without another word, her heels clicking against the tile floor like a countdown. Ava set down her cup carefully. "So that was fun. I'm sorry." Ethan rubbed his temple. "She's complicated." She looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. That's her default setting. He exhaled slowly. "Margot married my father when I was 15. After he died, she tried to take control of the company. I spent 5 years fighting her in court. We have a fragile peace now. She doesn't seem peaceful. She's not." Ethan met her eyes. "And she's going to ask questions about you." What kind of questions? The kind that come with background checks and financial audits. Ava felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why would she do that? Because she thinks everyone wants something from me. Money, access, status. He hesitated. And because she's probably right most of the time. The words hung between them, not an accusation, but a warning. I don't want anything from you, Ava said quietly. I know. Ethan reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. But Margot won't believe that. And if she thinks you're a threat or an opportunity, she'll make your life difficult. Ava should have walked away then, should have recognized the red flags lining up like dominoes. But instead she thought about the way Ethan had shown up at her door with sunflowers. The way he listened. The way he made her feel like maybe starting over wasn't such a terrible idea after all. So what do we do? She asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. We could stop seeing each other. Or we set the terms ourselves. He leaned forward slightly. Margot expects me to date someone from her world, someone polished, connected, appropriate. If she thinks you're just a casual distraction, she'll dismiss you. But if she believes you're someone I'm serious about, she'll back off, maybe, or she'll go nuclear. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. But if you're willing, if we're careful, we might be able to keep this. Whatever this is. Without her interference, Ava studied him. This man she'd known for 3 weeks. This stranger who'd become something more without either of them planning it. What exactly are you proposing? Dinner, next Friday. Margot's hosting a charity gala. If we show up together, it sends a message that I'm not available for her matchmaking schemes. You want me to be your buffer. I want you to be my friend. In public. He said it carefully, like he was aware of how absurd it sounded. No strings. No expectations, just 2 people who happen to enjoy each other's company. Showing up at an event where my stepmother can see we're not hiding. Ava knew she should say no, knew this was the kind of arrangement that ended badly in every rom-com she'd ever watched. But she also knew that Ethan had shown up when she needed someone, even if she hadn't known she needed someone, and maybe it was her turn to show up for him. 1 condition, she said, no more corporate robot mode. If I'm doing this, I want the version of you who assembles IKEA furniture and orders in terrible Italian. Ethan smiled. The real one. The one that made him look 10 years younger. Deal. If you think this plan is going to backfire spectacularly, hit subscribe and drop a comment with your predictions. Let's see if you're right. The gala was exactly what Ava expected. Crystal chandeliers, string quartets, and people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. She'd borrowed a dress from Claire, simple black, nothing flashy, and spent 20 minutes on YouTube learning how to walk in heels without looking like a newborn giraffe. Ethan picked her up at 7. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his shoulders. And when he saw her, something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe. Or appreciation. You look... He stopped himself. Ready? Terrified. But yes. The venue was a historic mansion in Beacon Hill, the kind of place that had plaques on every wall explaining which dead rich person had slept there. Ethan guided her inside with a hand at the small of her back. Light, respectful, but present enough that people noticed. Margot was holding court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by a small circle of admirers. She spotted them immediately. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed. Ethan. She air-kissed both his cheeks, then turned to Ava. Miss Morgan, how unexpected. Mrs. Hale. Ava smiled politely, remembering the advice Claire had given her. Don't apologize for existing. It's Ms. Hale. Actually, Margot's correction was gentle but pointed. I've gone back to my maiden name. Family legacy, you understand? Of course. Margot gestured to the man beside her, tall, silver-haired, wearing a bow tie that looked like it cost more than Ava's rent. This is Judge Richard Carrington. Richard, this is Ethan's friend, Ava Morgan. The pause before friend was deliberate. Judge Carrington shook her hand warmly. Pleasure to meet you. What brings you to Boston, Miss Morgan? Writing, Ava said simply. I'm working on a novel. How fascinating. His tone was genuine, not patronizing. What's it about? Ava hesitated. She'd been deflecting that question for 3 years. But something about the way Ethan was watching her, quiet and steady, made her answer honestly. It's about a woman who spends her whole life trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for her, and one day she stops trying. Margot's smile tightened. How modern. I'd love to read it when it's finished, Judge Carrington said. He glanced at Ethan. You didn't mention you were seeing someone. We're taking it slow, Ethan replied smoothly. Sensible. The judge nodded approvingly. Though I have to say, Ethan, your stepmother has been trying to set you up with her goddaughter for months. I believe Charlotte just returned from Paris. Margot's expression brightened. Yes, she's doing incredible work with sustainable fashion. I really think you two would... I'm sure Charlotte is wonderful, Ethan interrupted gently. But I'm not interested. The words landed like a stone in still water. Margot's smile froze. Before she could respond, a waiter approached with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Ava reached for a crostini and immediately realized it was a mistake. The thing was loaded with some kind of fish mousse that tasted like the ocean had died and been reincarnated as a canapé. She swallowed with difficulty, trying not to make a face. Ethan leaned in close, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Bathroom. Second door on the left. I'll cover. Ava excused herself quickly, navigating through the crowd toward the hallway. She found the bathroom, marble counters, gold fixtures, a chandelier over the sink, and ran cold water over her wrists, trying to calm her racing heart. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here. These people could smell outsiders like sharks smelled blood. The door opened. Ava expected another guest, but it was Ethan. You're in the women's room, she pointed out. I'm aware. He closed the door behind him. You okay? I just ate something that tasted like regret and bad decisions. He smiled. The fish mousse. Yeah, it's terrible. Margot insists on it every year because it's elegant. Your stepmother and I have very different definitions of elegant. Ethan leaned against the counter beside her. You're doing great. I'm hiding in a bathroom. Strategic retreat. That's different. He handed her a mint from his pocket. Look, I know this isn't easy. Margot's a lot. But you held your own out there. Ava unwrapped the mint slowly. She hates me. She hates everyone I spend time with who isn't pre-approved by her country club. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Ethan turned to face her fully. But here's the thing, you told the truth about your novel. You didn't try to impress them or pretend to be someone you're not. And that matters more than you think. To who? To me. The words were simple, but the way he said them wasn't. Ava felt something shift. A recognition, maybe, or a promise neither of them was ready to name. Before she could respond, someone knocked on the door. Occupied. Ethan called out, a woman's voice, annoyed. There's another bathroom downstairs. They looked at each other and started laughing. Quiet, slightly hysterical laughter that came from too much tension and not enough air. Okay, Ava said finally. Let's go back out there before your stepmother sends a search party. Or worse, Charlotte. They returned to the party together. Margot was watching from across the room, her expression unreadable. But for the rest of the evening, she kept her distance. At one point, Ethan introduced Ava to a tech entrepreneur who was genuinely interested in her writing. They talked for 20 minutes about narrative structure and character development, and when the conversation ended, the entrepreneur handed her his card and told her to send him the first chapter when she was ready. Ava looked at the card, then at Ethan, who was standing a few feet away watching her with quiet pride. Maybe she didn't belong in this world, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. As they left the gala, Ethan hailed a cab and opened the door for her. Thank you, she said, for tonight. Thank you for not running when Margot started talking about Charlotte. I considered it. He smiled. I know. The cab pulled away and Ava watched the mansion disappear behind them, all that light and polish and performance fading into the Boston night. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, even though he was sitting right beside her. Next time, we're skipping the fish mousse. She grinned and typed back, next time, I'm bringing pepper spray. 3 days later, Ethan texted her at 11 p.m. Emergency. Need your help. Ava was already in pajamas, halfway through a documentary about penguin mating rituals. She called him immediately. What's wrong? I have a client dinner tomorrow night. The Hendersons, they're selling a family business, very traditional, very married. He sounded tired. They specifically requested to meet my partner. Margot told them I was seeing someone. Of course she did. I can cancel, but it'll cost me the deal. And I've been working on this acquisition for 8 months. Ava should have said no. Should have recognized that this was escalating beyond coffee and charity galas. But she heard the exhaustion in his voice. The weight of constantly performing, constantly calculating. What time, she asked. 7. And Ava, they're going to ask questions. About us. How we met. How long we've been together. We need a story that sounds real. They spent the next hour on the phone, building their cover. They'd met at a bookstore, believable, since Ava actually loved books and Ethan had admitted to haunting rare book sales when he needed to think. They'd been dating for 2 months, long enough to seem serious, short enough to explain why no one knew about it. They kept it private because Ava valued her privacy, and Ethan was tired of his relationships becoming board meeting gossip. It was a good story, almost good enough to believe. The restaurant was French, the kind with a single name and no prices on the menu. Ethan met her outside looking sharp in a navy suit. He handed her a small box. What's this? Insurance. He opened it. Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver with a small charm in the shape of a book. Ethan, I can't. It's not real silver. I got it from a vintage shop this afternoon. He fastened it around her wrist carefully. But the Hendersons will notice details. And if they see you wearing something I gave you, it sells the story. Ava looked down at the bracelet. The gesture was thoughtful. Too thoughtful for someone who was supposedly just helping him close a business deal. Thank you, she said quietly. Inside, the Hendersons were already seated, a couple in their late 60s, dressed conservatively, radiating the kind of old money stability that came from generations of careful decisions. Mrs. Henderson smiled warmly when they approached. Mr. Henderson stood to shake Ethan's hand with the grip of someone who'd spent his life evaluating people. Ethan, good to see you. He turned to Ava. And you must be the mysterious girlfriend we've heard about. Ava Morgan. She shook his hand firmly. Mysterious is generous. I prefer private. Mrs. Henderson laughed. I like her already. Please, sit. The dinner started smoothly. Ethan handled the business discussion with practiced ease. Numbers, projections, transition timelines. But every few minutes, Mrs. Henderson would pivot the conversation back to personal questions. How did you two meet? Ava launched into their rehearsed story, adding small details they'd agreed on. The bookstore was near Copley Square. She'd been reaching for a novel on a high shelf. Ethan had offered to help and then argued with her about the ending. What book? Mrs. Henderson asked, delighted. Ava panicked for half a second. They hadn't prepared for that. But Ethan answered smoothly. Persuasion. She said Captain Wentworth waited too long. I said he waited exactly as long as he needed to. It was perfect. Literary, romantic, the kind of detail that sounded real because it revealed character. Mrs. Henderson practically glowed. And who won the argument? She did, Ethan said, glancing at Ava with something that looked dangerously close to actual affection. She's usually right about these things. The conversation flowed easily after that. Mr. Henderson asked Ava about her writing. She told him about the novel, and he listened with genuine interest. Mrs. Henderson shared stories about her own grandmother, who'd been a teacher and secret poet during the Depression. Then, over dessert, Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair and said, Ethan, I'm going to be direct. We've had 3 other offers on the business. 2 of them are offering more money. The table went quiet. But, Mr. Henderson continued, money isn't everything. My father built this company from nothing, and I want it to go to someone who understands what that means. Someone who knows that legacy is about more than profit margins. He looked at Ava, then back at Ethan. The reason I wanted to meet your partner is because I needed to know you're building something outside the boardroom. My wife and I have been married 42 years. I've closed a lot of deals in that time, but none of them matter as much as coming home to someone who reminds me why I do this work. Mrs. Henderson reached across the table and squeezed her husband's hand. What I'm saying, Mr. Henderson finished, is that I trust a man who makes time for the people he cares about, who shows up to dinner and looks at his girlfriend the way you look at Ava. He extended his hand. You've got the deal, Ethan. Let's make this official. Ethan shook his hand, his expression carefully controlled. But Ava saw something flicker beneath the surface. Relief, maybe, or guilt. After the Hendersons left, Ethan and Ava sat in silence. The restaurant was emptying out, chairs being stacked on tables around them. That was... Ava started. I know. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I didn't expect them to make it about us instead of the business? Yeah. Ava touched the bracelet on her wrist. The persuasion reference was good. Very convincing. I actually read it in college. He looked at her directly. And I do think Wentworth waited too long. There was something in the way he said it, like he wasn't talking about the book anymore. Ava's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoy your performance tonight. But remember, eventually every show ends. MH. She showed Ethan the screen. His jaw tightened. Margot. How did she know I was here? She has people everywhere. Assistants, colleagues, board members who owe her favors. He stood abruptly. I'll handle this. Ethan, I'll handle it, he repeated, but his voice was strained. Thank you for tonight. I'll get you a cab. He was shutting down, pulling back into the controlled, careful version of himself that she'd only seen in glimpses. Ava wanted to push, to ask what he was really afraid of, but the look on his face stopped her. In the cab ride home, she stared at Margot's text. Eventually, every show ends. The words felt like a countdown. If you've ever had to pretend to be someone you're not and started wondering if the pretending was becoming real, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for what happens next. Ethan disappeared for 4 days. He didn't answer texts. His assistant said he was in meetings. His office voicemail was full. Ava told herself it didn't matter. They weren't actually together. This was just an arrangement, but the silence felt louder than any argument. On the 5th day, he showed up at her apartment at 6 a.m. She opened the door in sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her hair in a messy bun. Do you ever sleep? Not really. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Can I come in? She stepped aside. Ethan walked to her half-assembled kitchen table and set down a folder. What's that? Margot's filing a motion to review my fitness as CEO. She's claiming I'm making reckless decisions, neglecting my fiduciary duties, and letting personal relationships compromise the company. He said it flatly, like reading from a script. She has board members backing her. A hearing is scheduled for next month. Ava sat down slowly. Because of me. Because of her. You're just the excuse she's been looking for. Ethan, I need to ask you something. He looked at her directly, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something close to fear in his expression. There's a board dinner next week. All the major shareholders, their families. It's the annual tradition, very public, very scrutinized. If I show up alone, it'll confirm Margot's narrative that I'm unstable and isolated. So you want me to go with you? I want you to have a choice. He opened the folder, revealing documents, emails, meeting notes, financial records. This is everything Margot's using against me. I want you to read it. Understand what you're walking into. Because if you come to this dinner, she's going to come after you. Background checks, private investigators, every mistake you've ever made put under a microscope. Ava scanned the documents. Margot had been thorough. She'd compiled evidence of every meeting Ethan had missed, every decision he'd delegated, every moment he'd chosen something other than work. It was technically accurate, but completely devoid of context. This is manipulation, Ava said. This is corporate warfare, and Margot's very good at it. Why does she hate you so much? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Because when my father died, he left me the company in his will, not her. And she spent the last decade trying to prove I don't deserve it. Do you? I don't know anymore. He closed the folder. I built this company into something 10 times what my father left. But I've also sacrificed everything else. Friends, relationships, any version of myself that isn't about profit margins and quarterly reports. Margot's not wrong that I've been different lately. I have been. Because for the first time in years, I actually want to be. Ava felt something shift in her chest. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. What changed? You did. He said it simply, like stating a fact. You showed up in my life by accident, and suddenly everything I thought I wanted felt less important than making you laugh. The words hung between them. Too honest. Too real for an arrangement that was supposed to be temporary. I'll go to the dinner, Ava said quietly. Ava, you don't have to. I know. But I'm going anyway. She met his eyes. Not because you need me to. Because I want to see what Margot does when someone doesn't back down. The board dinner was held at a private club that smelled like old leather and older money. Ava wore a burgundy dress she'd found at a consignment shop. Elegant enough to fit in, distinctive enough to be remembered. Ethan met her at the entrance, and when he saw her, something in his expression softened. You look incredible. You look like you're going to war. Same thing. Inside, the room was arranged with military precision. Circular tables, name cards, a podium at the front. Margot was already there, holding court with a cluster of board members. She was wearing emerald green and diamonds that caught the light like tiny warnings. When she saw Ethan and Ava enter together, her smile sharpened. Ethan. Miss Morgan. How persistent of you both, Margot. Ethan's voice was level. I don't believe you've officially met Ava. Oh, I've heard plenty. Margot turned to Ava with cold appraisal. Tell me, dear, what exactly do you do? Besides accompany Ethan to events, I'm a writer. How quaint. Published? Not yet, but I'm working on it, aren't we all? Margot's tone was dismissive. She turned to the man beside her, a distinguished-looking executive in his 70s. David, this is Ethan's friend, Ava Morgan, she writes. David Mercer extended his hand warmly. Any writer is a friend of mine. What's your subject? Stories about people who don't fit the molds they're given, Ava said. And what happens when they stop trying? Margot's expression flickered just for a second, something almost like recognition. The dinner proceeded with painful formality. Speeches about quarterly earnings, toasts to legacy, carefully worded praise that sounded more like surveillance. Ava sat beside Ethan, acutely aware that every conversation at their table was being monitored by the room. Then, during the main course, a board member named Gerald Ashford stood up. He was Margot's age, impeccably dressed and holding a wine glass like a weapon. I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, to Ethan Cole, a man who's built an empire but seems to have forgotten that empires require full-time attention. The room went silent. Ethan didn't flinch. Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate your concern for my time management. It's not just your time I'm concerned about. Gerald gestured broadly. We've all noticed the changes. Missed meetings. Delegated decisions. Rumor has it you're prioritizing personal interests. He looked pointedly at Ava. My personal life is exactly that, Ethan said calmly. Personal, not when it affects shareholder value. Gerald set down his glass. Margot has raised valid questions about your commitment. Perhaps it's time we had that conversation publicly. Ava felt Ethan tense beside her. This was the trap. Get him to react emotionally in front of the board. Prove Margot's point that he was compromised. Before Ethan could respond, Ava stood up. May I say something? The room turned to her, 50 pairs of eyes, skeptical and curious. I know I'm not supposed to be part of this conversation. I'm just the girlfriend, right? The distraction. The thing that's pulling Ethan away from what really matters. She looked at Gerald directly. But here's what I've learned in the past 2 months. Ethan works 18-hour days. He answers emails at midnight. He closes deals while most of you are asleep. And yes, he also makes time for coffee and dinner and conversations that aren't about profit margins. She glanced at Margot. I'm sorry if that offends your sense of what a CEO should be. But maybe the problem isn't that Ethan's changed. Maybe it's that you're threatened by the fact that he's finally building a life outside of this room. The silence was deafening. Then David Mercer started clapping, slowly, deliberately. A few others joined in. Tentative at first, then stronger. Margot's expression was ice. How touching. But speeches don't change numbers, Miss Morgan. And the numbers show a pattern of declining engagement. The numbers, Ethan said quietly, show record profits for 3 consecutive quarters. The Parker acquisition alone will increase our market share by 15%. So unless you're defining engagement as agreeing with everything you say, Margot, I'm doing just fine. He stood, buttoning his jacket. But you're right about one thing. I have changed. I've remembered that this company exists to build something meaningful, not just to satisfy your need for control. And if the board wants to remove me for that, I'll accept it. But I won't apologize for it. He offered Ava his arm. Would you like to leave? She took it without hesitation. They walked out together, leaving 50 stunned faces behind them. In the cab, neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Ethan said, "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen." Probably both. Ava's hands were shaking. "Did I just cost you your company?" "I don't know, but it was worth it." He looked at her with something raw and undefended. "Thank you. For what?" "For showing up. For fighting. For reminding me that some things matter more than winning." Ava's phone buzzed. Another text from Margot, impressive performance. "But this isn't over." She showed Ethan the screen. He read it and smiled grimly. "No," he said, "it's not." They didn't go home. Instead, Ethan directed the cab to a pier overlooking Boston Harbor. It was past 11. The waterfront mostly empty except for a few scattered joggers and insomniacs walking dogs. The city lights reflected on the water like fractured stars. "I used to come here when I first took over the company," Ethan said, leaning against the railing, "when everything felt impossible and I couldn't breathe in board meetings anymore." Ava stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Did it help?" "Sometimes. It reminded me that there's a world outside spreadsheets and shareholder meetings, that I could still be just Ethan, not the CEO, not my father's son, just someone standing by the water at midnight." He pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photograph, edges soft from handling. He handed it to Ava. It showed a younger Ethan, maybe 16, standing next to an older man who had his eyes but softer features. They were both holding hammers covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. "My father," Ethan said quietly. "This was 3 months before he died. We were building bookshelves for the local library. He said that's what money was for, making things that last longer than you do. He looks happy." He was. Right up until the heart attack. Ethan took the photo back, tracing the edge with his thumb. "After he died, I found out the business was drowning in debt. He'd been hiding it for years, too proud to ask for help. I was 26, furious and determined to prove I could fix what he'd broken." "Did you?" "Yes, but I became someone he wouldn't recognize in the process." He put the photo away carefully. "Margot was there through all of it. She helped me navigate the early years, taught me how to play the corporate game. I thought she cared about the company, about me. It took me too long to realize she just cared about control." Ava watched him, really watched him. The careful posture, the controlled expression, the way he held himself like armor. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. That first night when you showed up at my apartment, why did you really come?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the water. "Your text made me laugh, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. The last time I'd wanted to do something spontaneous, something that didn't serve a strategic purpose. I told myself I was just being neighborly. But honestly, I was lonely. And your message felt like permission to show up as someone other than who I'd been for the last 10 years. And the sunflowers," he smiled faintly. "They reminded me of something my father used to say, that the best gestures are the ones you can't justify on a cost-benefit analysis." Ava felt something loosen in her chest. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of a loneliness that mirrored her own. "I need to tell you something," she said, "about why I really left Chicago." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Patient, I had this editor, Marcus Chen. He was brilliant, demanding, the kind of person who could make you believe you were capable of anything. For 2 years, I worked on a long-form piece about immigrant families rebuilding after losing everything. It was the best thing I'd ever written." She paused. "Marcus submitted it to a major competition under his name. Won $50,000 and a book deal. When I confronted him, he said I should be grateful for the exposure, that no one would care about the story if my name was on it. Ava, I didn't fight him. I just left, moved here, started over. Because it felt easier than admitting I'd let someone steal 2 years of my life." She looked at Ethan. "So when you asked if I wanted anything from you, the truth is, I don't know how to want things for myself anymore. I spent so long making myself smaller, quieter, less complicated. And then you showed up at my door with chocolates, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to take up space. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, the one with the bracelet he'd given her. That editor was wrong, he said quietly. Your story mattered because you wrote it, because you cared enough to spend 2 years getting it right. And the fact that he stole credit doesn't change that. It doesn't give me those years back either. No. But maybe you can write something better, something he could never touch. Ava laughed, but it came out shaky. Is that your CEO advice? That's my advice as someone who wasted a decade building an empire he's not sure he even wants. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. We're both good at sacrificing ourselves for things that don't deserve it. Maybe we can be bad at that together. The words settled between them, not a promise exactly, but an invitation. Ava's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, expecting another text from Margot. Instead, it was an email notification. The subject line made her breath catch. Your submission to the Atlantic Monthly. She opened it with shaking hands. Dear Ms. Morgan, thank you for your submission, spaces we weren't meant for. We'd like to publish it in our November issue. Please find our contract and payment details attached. We were particularly moved by your exploration of what it means to reclaim your own story. We look forward to working with you. Ava read it 3 times, certain she'd misunderstood, but the words stayed the same. What is it? Ethan asked. She showed him the screen, unable to speak. He read it, then looked at her with something close to pride. When did you submit this? 3 weeks ago, right after the charity gala. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up until 4 a.m. rewriting an essay I'd abandoned 6 months ago. I didn't think they'd even read it. They read it, and they want it. Ethan smiled, the real one, unguarded. This is incredible, Ava. It's just one essay. It's proof that you still know how to fight for your own work. That's not just anything. Ava felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, laughing. I can't believe this is happening. I can. Ethan pulled her into a hug. Sudden, warm, uncalculated. She let herself lean into it, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the salt air from the harbor. When they pulled apart, something had shifted. The distance they'd been carefully maintaining, the reminder that this was temporary, an arrangement, a performance, felt less solid. We should celebrate, Ethan said. Now? It's almost midnight. Exactly. When else are you supposed to celebrate getting published? He pulled out his phone. I know a place. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a 24-hour diner that smelled like coffee and syrup. Ethan ordered waffles. Ava got pancakes and bacon. They ate in comfortable silence, trading bites and stealing each other's coffee. Can I read it? Ethan asked. The essay? Ava pulled up the document on her phone, handed it to him. He read slowly, carefully, the way someone reads when they're actually paying attention. When he finished, he set the phone down and looked at her. This is about us, some of it. The parts about choosing to show up even when you're terrified. About building something real in spaces that feel temporary. It's beautiful. He hesitated. And it's true. What is? We weren't meant for this. You and me. Wrong text, wrong timing, wrong everything. But somehow it's the rightest thing I've done in years. Ava's heart was pounding. Ethan, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. It's David Mercer. From the board. At midnight? He doesn't sleep much, Ethan answered. David is everything. He listened for a moment, his face unreadable. Then, are you certain? Yes, I understand. Thank you. He hung up. What happened? Ava asked. Margot withdrew her motion. Effective immediately. He sounded stunned. David said after we left. 3 board members stood up and said if Margot forced a vote, they'd resign. They told her that Ethan Cole with a personal life is still more competent than any replacement she could find. She backed down rather than lose the board entirely. Ava laughed, relieved, disbelieving. We won? Apparently. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I didn't expect them to actually defend me. Maybe they were waiting for you to defend yourself first. He looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. I couldn't have done that without you. Yes, you could have. You just needed someone to remind you that you're allowed to. They sat there, 2 people who'd stumbled into each other's lives by accident. realizing that accidents could become anchors. Outside, the first light of dawn was starting to break over Boston. Ava thought about the essay that would be published, the board that had stood up for Ethan, the way everything had shifted in a single night. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. "I don't know, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing." Ava looked down at their joined hands, the bracelet he'd given her, the calluses on his fingers from years of holding too tightly to things that didn't hold him back. "I'm willing," she said, and for the first time in months, she meant it. If you've ever had a moment where everything changed in one night, for better or worse, drop a comment below. And hit subscribe because this story is about to get complicated. The essay published 2 weeks later. Ava woke up to 43 notifications. Emails from readers, messages from old colleagues, a DM from Marcus Chen that said, "Congratulations," and nothing else. She deleted it without responding. Ethan called at 7 a.m. "Have you seen Twitter?" "I don't have Twitter." "You should get Twitter. Your essay is trending." "What?" He sent her a screenshot. Spaces We Weren't Meant For was climbing the trending topics, filled with people sharing their own stories of reclaiming space, rebuilding identity, learning to take up room in worlds that tried to shrink them. Ava stared at her phone, overwhelmed. She'd written about feeling invisible, about choosing yourself when no one else does, about the strange courage it takes to show up honestly. And people were listening. "This is insane," she said. "This is deserved." Ethan's voice was warm. "I'm proud of you." 3 hours later, she got an email from a literary agent asking if she'd consider representation. By noon, there were 2 more. By evening, a small press reached out about the novel she'd mentioned in passing. Would she be willing to send the first 3 chapters? Ava sat in her apartment, surrounded by the same moving boxes that still hadn't been fully unpacked, and felt like the ground had shifted under her feet. That night, Ethan showed up with Thai food and champagne. "We're celebrating," he announced, setting bags on her counter. "You already sent me flowers this morning." "Those were for the essay. This is for everything after." He poured 2 glasses, handed her one. "To Ava Morgan, writer, fighter, and the person who accidentally texted a stranger and changed both their lives." They clinked glasses. Ava took a sip, then set it down carefully. "Ethan, can we talk about what we're doing?" His expression shifted, cautious. "What do you mean?" "I mean, at the gala, we were pretending. At the board dinner, we were performing. But somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like an arrangement. And I need to know if I'm the only one who feels that." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass and turned to face her fully. 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting with a client in New York. I was supposed to stay overnight, close the deal over breakfast. But halfway through dinner, all I could think about was getting back here. To you. I took a red-eye home at 2 a.m. because I'd promised to help you move furniture the next morning. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He stepped closer. A month ago, my assistant asked what I wanted for my birthday. I couldn't answer. I haven't cared about birthdays in 10 years. But yesterday I found myself thinking about spending it with you. Maybe taking you to that bookstore you love. Maybe just sitting on your floor eating takeout and listening to you read chapters of your novel. Ava's breath caught. So no, Ethan said quietly. You're not the only one who feels this. I'm falling for you, Ava. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this, how to be someone who isn't always calculating the next move. But with you, I don't want to calculate. I just want to show up. Ava closed the distance between them. Then show up. He kissed her, slow, deliberate, like he'd been waiting for permission. She kissed him back, hands sliding up to his shoulders, anchoring herself in the solidity of him. It wasn't desperate or frantic. It was the kind of kiss that felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this? I think we've been doing this since you showed up with sunflowers. He laughed softly. Best wrong text I ever received. They spent the evening tangled together on her couch talking about everything and nothing. Ethan told her about his father's dream to open a bookstore before the business consumed him. Ava told him about the novel she'd been too afraid to finish. The one about a woman learning to build a life that fit her instead of squeezing herself into spaces designed for someone else. I want to read it, Ethan said. It's not finished. I don't care. I want to read what you're working on. Ava pulled up the manuscript on her laptop, handed it to him. He read for an hour, silent and focused. When he finally looked up, his expression was serious. "This is extraordinary. You're biased. I'm honest. This is the kind of story people need, the kind that makes them feel less alone." He closed the laptop carefully. "You're going to finish this. And when you do, you're going to publish it. And I'm going to buy 100 copies and leave them in boardrooms around the world. That's excessive. That's strategy." He pulled her closer. "Corporate CEOs need to remember what it feels like to be human. Your book will help." Ava laughed, but it caught in her throat. "What if I can't finish it?" "Then I'll sit here and remind you why you started. Every single day if I have to." It was a promise, the kind that felt heavier than words usually allowed. They fell asleep on the couch, Ava's head on Ethan's chest, his hand in her hair. When she woke at 3 a.m., he was still there, breathing evenly, holding her like she was something worth protecting. She thought about the wrong text that had brought him here. The coffee dates and charity galas and board dinners. The moment she'd decided to stop hiding and start showing up, everything about this should have been temporary. Should have been a mistake. But lying there in the quiet dark, listening to Ethan's heartbeat, Ava couldn't remember the last time something had felt this right. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She reached for it carefully, trying not to wake him. A text from an unknown number. "I have information about Ethan Cole you'll want to see. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Thinking Cup Coffee. Come alone." Logan Pierce. Ava froze. Logan Pierce. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. She Googled quickly. The first result was a photo from 2 years ago. Ethan at a charity gala, his arm around a blonde woman in a red dress. The caption identified her as Logan Pierce, tech entrepreneur and Cole's rumored girlfriend. Ava's stomach dropped. She looked at Ethan, still sleeping. Thought about waking him, asking who Logan was and why she was reaching out now. But something stopped her. Pride, maybe, or the fear that she'd misread everything. Instead, she screenshotted the message and set an alarm for 9 a.m. If Logan Pierce had information about Ethan, Ava wanted to hear it before she decided whether to trust him with the rest of her heart. Thinking Cup was crowded at 10 a.m. Students with laptops, business people grabbing coffee between meetings, the low hum of conversation filling the space. Ava arrived 5 minutes early, scanning the room for anyone who looked like the woman from the photo. She didn't have to wait long. Logan Pierce walked in exactly on time, dressed in tailored black pants and a silk blouse, carrying herself with the kind of confidence that came from knowing everyone was watching. She spotted Ava immediately and walked over, extending a manicured hand. "Ava Morgan, I've heard a lot about you." "I wish I could say the same." Ava shook her hand briefly. "Your text was vague." "Intentionally." Logan sat down, ordered an espresso from a passing waiter. "I wanted to talk in person. Away from Ethan's world. Why?" Logan studied her for a moment, assessing, calculating. "Because I care about Ethan, and I think you deserve to know what you're getting into." Ava felt her guard rise. "We're not, please." Logan's smile was thin. "I've seen the photos from the board dinner. The essay you wrote that's conveniently trending while Ethan's dealing with Margot. This isn't subtle. The essay has nothing to do with Ethan's business, doesn't it?" Logan leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you a story. 2 years ago, Ethan and I were together. Not an arrangement, an actual relationship. We met at a tech conference, hit it off, spent 6 months building something real. Or so I thought." She paused as her espresso arrived. "Then Margot decided I wasn't suitable. Wrong background, wrong connections, wrong potential for enhancing the Cole legacy. She made my life hell. Leaked stories to the press about my company having financial trouble. Convinced investors to pull funding. Even sent someone to audit my taxes looking for mistakes." Ava's chest tightened. "What did Ethan do?" "Nothing." Logan's voice was flat. "He said it wasn't his fight. That business and personal life needed to stay separate. When I asked him to stand up to Margot, he told me it would be easier if we just took a break. Until things calmed down. And did they? No, Margot made sure of that. Within 3 months, my company folded. I had to start over from scratch." She took a sip of espresso. "Ethan sent flowers and an apology, but he never fought for me." Ava wanted to defend him, to say that was 2 years ago, that people change. But she thought about how careful Ethan had been, how he'd framed their arrangement as strategic rather than real until she'd pushed him to admit otherwise. Why are you telling me this? Ava asked. Because you seem smart. And I don't want to watch another woman get destroyed because Ethan Cole is too afraid to choose something over his company. Logan pulled out her phone, showed Ava a screenshot. This was sent to me yesterday. It was an email from Margot to someone named Victoria Ashford, dated 3 days ago. Victoria, the Morgan woman is more persistent than I anticipated. I'm attaching the preliminary background check. Note the student loan debt, the employment gap, the editor who claimed credit for her work. She's vulnerable. Offer her $50,000 to sign an NDA and disappear. If she refuses, we move to Plan B. Ava's hands went cold. She's trying to pay me off? Or threaten you. Margot doesn't care which as long as you're gone. Logan put her phone away. I'm showing you this because I made the mistake of thinking love would be enough. That Ethan would eventually choose me over Margot's approval. But he didn't. And I don't think he'll choose you either. You don't know that, don't I? Logan's expression softened slightly. Ava, I'm not trying to hurt you. But you need to understand. Ethan's been under Margot's control for so long he doesn't know how to break free. He'll care about you right up until the moment it costs him something real, and then he'll calculate whether you're worth it. And you think I'm not? I think he'll decide the company is more important. 'Cause that's what he always decides. Ava stood up abruptly. Thank you for the warning. But I'll make my own choices about who to trust. Then choose carefully. Logan's voice followed her toward the door, because Margot's already made hers, and she plays to win. Outside, Ava stood on the sidewalk trying to steady her breathing. She pulled out her phone, stared at Ethan's contact. She should tell him. Should show him Margot's email and ask what he planned to do about it. But Logan's words echoed. He'll calculate whether you're worth it. Ava had spent 2 years watching Marcus Chen take credit for her work because she'd been too afraid to fight. She'd left Chicago because walking away felt safer than demanding what she deserved. She wasn't going to do that again. She called Ethan. He answered on the second ring. Hey, was just thinking about you, like we need to talk. Can you meet me at my apartment? Is everything okay? Just come over, please. 20 minutes later, Ethan stood in her living room, his expression concerned. What happened? Ava showed him Logan's text, the screenshot of Margot's email. She watched his face as he read, watched the way his jaw tightened, the way something cold settled in his eyes. Margot reached out to Logan. He said slowly, She's trying to turn people against you, or warn me about you. He looked up sharply. What? Logan told me about your relationship. About how Margot destroyed her company and you did nothing. Ethan set the phone down carefully. That's not, it's more complicated than that. Then explain it. Logan and I were together. Margot didn't approve. When things got ugly, I advised Logan to take a step back, to give Margot time to adjust. I thought if we were patient, if we didn't force a confrontation, Margot would eventually accept it. But she didn't. No, she escalated. And by the time I realized how bad it had gotten, Logan's company was already falling apart. I tried to help. I offered to invest to connect her with other funding sources. But she refused. Said I'd already made my choice by not standing up to Margot earlier. Did she have a point? Ethan was quiet. Yes, I failed her. I thought I could protect both the company and our relationship, and I ended up losing both. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life. And you think this time will be different? I know it will be. He stepped closer. Because I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago. And because you're not Logan. You don't need me to save you. You've already proven you can fight for yourself. Ava wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that love could overcome corporate politics and manipulative stepmothers. But she'd trusted before. Had believed that talent mattered more than politics, that showing up would be enough. Margot offered me $50,000 to disappear, she said quietly. Ethan's expression hardened. You're not seriously considering? No. But I need you to understand what I'm risking by staying. My privacy. My reputation. Maybe my career if she decides to make things difficult. Ava met his eyes. I need to know that if it comes down to a choice, me or the company, you won't hesitate. Ava. I need to hear you say it, Ethan. Because I've spent too long being someone's second choice. And I won't do it again. The silence stretched between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, Ethan said, I choose you. Even if it costs you the company? Even then. He crossed the space between them, took her hands. I've spent 10 years building an empire I don't enjoy ruling. And in 3 months with you, I've remembered what it feels like to actually live. So yes, if Margot forces a choice, I choose you. Every time. Ava searched his face, looking for hesitation. Found none. Okay, she said. Then we deal with Margot together. How? We call her bluff. Set up a meeting. Make it clear I'm not going anywhere. And if she wants to keep playing games, we go public with everything, the background checks, the payoff attempt, all of it. Ethan smiled grimly. You want to go to war with Margot Hale? I want to stop letting powerful people decide my story. Ava squeezed his hands. Are you in? He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. I'm in. They spent the next hour strategizing, drafting an email to Margot requesting a meeting, documenting every interaction they could remember, building a timeline of her interference. It felt like preparing for battle. When they finally sent the email, Ava's hands were shaking. Ethan noticed. We don't have to do this. Yes, we do. Because if we don't, she'll just keep coming. And I'm tired of running. Her phone buzzed. A response from Margot, fast and curt. Monday, 2 p.m., my office. Come alone, Miss Morgan. Ava showed Ethan the screen. He frowned. I'm coming with you. She said alone. I don't care what she said. Ethan. Ava put a hand on his arm. Let me do this. I need to face her myself. She'll try to intimidate you. Then I'll let her try, and I'll show her it doesn't work anymore. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Maybe pride. Maybe recognition that she needed to do this her way. Okay, he said quietly, but I'll be right outside that office. And if she tries anything, you'll be the first person I call. Ava managed a smile. I promise. They spent the rest of the weekend together, cooking meals that didn't turn out quite right, reading chapters of each other's work, falling asleep tangled together like they were trying to memorize the shape of safety. On Sunday night, as Ava lay with her head on Ethan's chest, she said, What if this doesn't work? Then we'll figure out what comes next, together. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's worth it. He tilted her chin up, met her eyes. You're worth it. Ava kissed him, slow and certain, trying to believe that love could be enough. Monday morning arrived too quickly. If you've ever had to face someone who tried to control your life and decided to fight back, drop a comment and hit subscribe. Because what happens next is going to change everything. Margot's office occupied the top floor of the Coal Industries building, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, and air conditioning set cold enough to make visitors uncomfortable. Ava arrived at 1:55 p.m., wearing the same burgundy dress from the board dinner, a small act of defiance, a reminder that she'd already faced this room and walked out stronger. The receptionist led her to Margot's door, knocked once, then disappeared down the hallway like she wanted no part of what was about to happen. Come in. Miss Morgan. Margot sat behind a glass desk, perfectly composed in a dove-gray suit. She didn't stand, didn't offer coffee or pleasantries, just gestured to the chair across from her. Thank you for coming alone. I'm here. Ava sat down, kept her posture straight. Let's talk. Margot opened a folder, thick, organized, labeled with Ava's name. I've done my research on you, Miss Morgan. Quite thoroughly, in fact. She pulled out the first document, a credit report. $63,000 in student loan debt. 3 credit cards, 2 of them near their limit. A checking account that's been overdrawn twice in the past year. Ava said nothing. Employment history is sporadic, Margot continued, turning pages. 2 years at Chicago Monthly, writing what I believe is called clickbait. Before that, freelance work with inconsistent income. A gap of 7 months between jobs. And then, of course, there's the matter of your former editor. She slid across a printed email thread, messages between Marcus Chen and the competition committee, discussing Ava's stolen work. Mr. Chen was quite forthcoming when I reached out. He claims you willingly allowed him to submit the piece under his name, that you lacked the confidence to enter yourself. That's a lie, is it? Margot's smile was cold. Or is it simply a different interpretation of the same events? The kind of interpretation that would make you look unstable, unreliable. The type of person who might fabricate a relationship with a CEO for financial gain. Ava's stomach dropped. You're threatening to smear me. I'm offering you context. Margot closed the folder. Ethan is not a man who thinks clearly when emotions are involved. He gets attached, makes poor decisions. I've seen it before. With Logan Pierce. Ah, she warned you. Margot didn't sound surprised. Good, then you understand the pattern. Ethan meets someone unexpected, convinces himself it's different this time. And 6 months later, he's back to being alone and twice as difficult to manage. Maybe that's because you keep interfering. I keep protecting. Margot's voice sharpened. Do you have any idea what it took to build this company back from the edge? Ethan's father left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. I spent years cleaning up his mess, teaching Ethan how to survive in a world that would eat him alive if he showed weakness. That doesn't give you the right to control his personal life. It gives me the responsibility to prevent him from destroying what we've built. Margot stood, walked to the window. You seem like a smart woman, Ava, so let me be direct. Ethan will not choose you over this company. When it comes down to it, when the board forces his hand, when shareholders start questioning his judgment, he will protect Coal Industries. Because that's what he does. It's who he is. You're wrong, am I? Margot turned back. Then why didn't he come with you today? Why did he let you walk into this meeting alone? Because I asked him to? Or because he knew what I would offer, and he wanted you to make this decision without his influence? Margot returned to her desk, pulled out a check. Already filled out, already signed. $50,000 made out to Ava Morgan. This is your exit, Margot said simply. Enough to pay off your debts. Give yourself a fresh start. All you have to do is sign an NDA, end your relationship with Ethan, and move on with your life. No scandal, no drama. Just a clean break. Ava stared at the check. $50,000. More money than she'd seen in one place in her entire life. Enough to stop worrying about rent, about student loans, about whether her writing could actually support her. And if I don't take it? Margot sat down slowly. Then I release a statement to the press about how Ethan Cole has been involved with a financially unstable writer who is currently under investigation for plagiarism, about how this relationship coincides with his declining performance as CEO, about how the board is concerned for his judgment and the company's future. That's not true. Truth is subjective. Miss Morgan, what matters is perception, and I have the resources to shape that perception very effectively. Margot leaned forward. You'll be painted as an opportunist, a gold digger, someone who saw a lonely billionaire and decided to take advantage. Your essay, your beautiful trending essay, will be reframed as a calculated PR move, and by the time I'm done, no respectable publication will touch your work. Ava felt ice spreading through her chest. You would destroy my career to control Ethan. I would do whatever is necessary to protect what I've built. What Ethan's father entrusted to me. Margot's expression was almost sad. I don't enjoy this, Miss Morgan, but I'm very good at it. The room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. Ava thought about her essay, the one that had taken her months to write, that had finally given her a voice again. Thought about the agent emails, the book interest, the readers who'd said her words made them feel less alone. Thought about Ethan, waiting outside this building, trusting her to handle this herself. I need time to think, she said quietly. Of course, you have until Friday. Margot slid the check across the desk. Take this with you. See what it feels like to hold your freedom. Ava picked up the check with shaking hands. The numbers felt obscene. A price tag on her dignity, on her relationship, on her right to choose her own life. She folded it carefully and put it in her purse. I'll be in touch, she said, and walked out before Margot could see her cry. Ethan was waiting in the lobby, pacing. When he saw her face, his expression shifted to alarm. What happened? Ava handed him the check without speaking. He read it, his jaw tightening. She offered you money and a threat. If I don't take it, she'll destroy my reputation. Tell the press I'm using you. Make sure no one will publish my work. She's bluffing. Is she? Ava's voice broke. She has connections I can't even imagine. And I've already seen what happens when powerful people decide to make me disappear. Marcus took credit for my work and faced zero consequences. What makes you think Margot will be any different? Ethan pulled her into his arms. She let herself lean into him, breathing in his familiar scent, coffee and something cedar, trying to anchor herself. We'll fight this, he said into her hair. We'll hire lawyers, With what money, Ethan? I can barely afford rent. And you heard what she said, this will damage the company. The board is already questioning you. If this turns into a public scandal, I don't care about the board. Yes, you do. Ava pulled back, looked at him. You've spent 10 years building this company. You can't just throw it away because your stepmother is blackmailing your girlfriend. Then what do you want me to do? The question hung between them, honest, painful. What Ava wanted was for none of this to be happening. Wanted to go back to the night of the wrong text when everything felt simple and possible. I need time to think, she said finally. Ethan's expression crumbled. Ava, please just give me a few days. She left before he could argue. Took the tea home, climbed the stairs to her apartment, and sat on the floor surrounded by moving boxes that still hadn't been fully unpacked. The check sat on her coffee table, a small rectangle of expensive paper that represented everything she'd been fighting against. The idea that she could be bought, that her choices only mattered as much as someone else allowed them to. Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. How did the meeting go? Ava stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain that she'd been offered $50,000 to disappear from the best relationship she'd ever had. Instead, she opened her laptop and pulled up the novel she'd been avoiding, the one about a woman learning to build a life that fit her instead of squeezing herself into spaces designed for someone else. She read the last chapter she'd written, a scene where the protagonist has to choose between safety and truth, between the easy path and the right one, and slowly, Ava started typing. Not the ending she'd planned, but the ending that felt true. 3 days passed. Ethan texted every morning, nothing pushy, just checking in. Ava responded with single words, fine, thinking soon. She spent the time writing, finishing the novel in a feverish sprint of 18-hour days and coffee-fueled nights. When she finally typed the last sentence, it was 4 a.m. on Thursday morning. She sent the manuscript to the agent who'd reached out. Attached a note, this is what I'm fighting for. If you're still interested, let me know. Then she called Ethan. He answered immediately, voice rough with sleep. Ava, I made my decision. Silence. Then, okay. I'm not taking Margot's money. She heard him exhale. Relief, maybe, or fear. But I need you to do something for me. She continued. I need you to tell me the truth. If this goes public, if Margot follows through on her threat, will you stand with me? Even if it costs you the company? Another silence. Longer this time? Yes, Ethan said finally. I will. Even if the board votes to remove you. Even then. Even if you lose everything you've built. Ava. His voice was steady. I've already decided. The company doesn't matter as much as you do. And if Margot can't accept that, then maybe it's time I built something new. Ava felt tears sliding down her face, relief and terror and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Okay, she whispered. Then let's finish this. What do you need me to do? Set up a meeting with Margot tomorrow, both of us this time. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She could hear him smile through the phone. That's the Ava Morgan I know. They talked until the sun came up, strategizing, preparing, admitting fears they'd been too proud to voice before. When they finally hung up, Ava felt exhausted and wired at the same time. Her phone buzzed. An email from the literary agent. I stayed up all night reading your manuscript. It's extraordinary. Let's talk representation, Ava laughed, slightly hysterical, mostly relieved. Maybe Margot could destroy her career, but she'd have to do it after Ava had already started building something new. Friday arrived cold and sharp. Ava met Ethan outside the coal industries building at noon. He was wearing his armor, the perfectly tailored suit, the calm expression that revealed nothing. But when he saw her, something softened. Ready? He asked. Not even a little bit. She took his hand. Let's go anyway. They walked into Margot's office together. Margot was waiting, her expression unreadable. But when she saw them enter holding hands, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise maybe, or irritation. Miss Morgan, I was expecting you alone. Change of plans. Ava sat down, Ethan beside her. We're doing this together. Margot's smile was thin. How romantic. Have you come to accept my offer? No. Ava pulled the check from her purse, still folded. I'm returning this. She placed it on the desk. Margot didn't touch it, I see. Then I assume you've accepted the consequences. Actually, Ethan said calmly, we're here to discuss your consequences. Margot raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Blackmail is illegal, Margot. Offering money to end a relationship while threatening professional retaliation, that's coercion. And we have documentation. He pulled out his phone, opened an email thread. This is the message you sent to Victoria Ashford, outlining your plan to pay Ava off or move to Plan B. Victoria forwarded it to me yesterday. She's uncomfortable with how far you're willing to go. Margot's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened slightly on her desk. Victoria misunderstood my intentions, did she? Ava pulled out her own phone. Because I also have a recording of our conversation from Monday, where you explicitly threatened to destroy my career if I didn't take your money. It was a bluff. Ava hadn't recorded anything, but Margot didn't know that. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state, Margot said coolly. Any recording made without my knowledge is inadmissible. In court, maybe, but not in the court of public opinion. Ethan leaned forward. How do you think your board will react when they learn you've been using company resources to investigate my personal relationships? That you've been threatening private citizens to maintain control over business decisions? You're bluffing. Try me, Ethan's voice was ice. I've spent the last 3 days compiling everything. The background checks you ran on Ava using company funds. The emails to Logan Pierce offering money to share concerning information about our relationship. The calls you made to Marcus Chen, suggesting he paint Ava as unstable. He pulled out a folder, thicker than the one Margot had shown Ava. This is 2 years of interference, Margot. Every relationship you sabotaged, every decision you manipulated, every time you prioritized control over the company's actual interests. Margot stood slowly. You would destroy this company to protect a woman you've known for 3 months? I would remove a corrupt board member to protect the company's integrity. There's a difference. The room was silent except for the city sounds filtering through the windows. Margot walked to the window, her back to them. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. Your father asked me to take care of you, to make sure you didn't make the same mistakes he did. My father died because he worked himself to death trying to live up to impossible standards. Ethan said, I won't make that mistake. But I also won't let you use his memory to justify your need for control. I built this company, you helped, and I'm grateful. But you don't own it, and you don't own me. He stood. I'm calling a board meeting for Monday. You can resign with dignity, or I can present this evidence and let them vote you out. Your choice. Margot turned back, her expression carefully controlled. But Ava saw something underneath. Fear, maybe. Or the first crack in armor that had been held too tightly for too long. You would really do this. Over her. I would do this because it's right. Ava just gave me the courage to finally act on it. Margot's gaze shifted to Ava. You understand what you're asking him to give up. I'm not asking him to give up anything, Ava said quietly. I'm asking him to build something better, with people who respect boundaries and don't use fear as a management tool. And you think that's possible? In this world? I think it's worth trying. Margot was silent for a long moment. Then she walked back to her desk, sat down with the careful precision of someone whose world had just shifted. I need time to consider. You have until Sunday night, Ethan said. After that, I move forward with or without your cooperation. They stood to leave. Ava was almost at the door when Margot spoke again. Miss Morgan, Ava turned back. That essay you wrote, about spaces you weren't meant for. Margot's expression was unreadable. It reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. That sometimes the spaces that reject us aren't worth fitting into. It wasn't an apology, but it was something close to acknowledgement. Ava nodded once, then left with Ethan's hand warm in hers. In the elevator, she finally let herself breathe. Did that just happen? I think so. Ethan pulled her close. You were incredible. I was terrified. Same thing sometimes. He kissed her forehead. Thank you for not taking the money. Thank you for being worth the risk. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Waiting there, surprisingly, was David Mercer, the board member who defended Ethan at the dinner. Ethan, Miss Morgan, do you have a moment? They stepped aside to a quiet corner. David looked serious but not unkind. I had a call from Victoria Ashford this morning. She's concerned about Margot's recent behavior. Shared some troubling emails. He glanced at Ethan. Is it true you're planning to request Margot's resignation? Yes, David nodded slowly. Good, it's overdue. Several board members have been waiting for you to take that step. We'll support you. Ava blinked. You will? Margot has been an asset to this company. But she's also been a liability, particularly when it comes to personal boundaries and appropriate conduct. He handed Ethan a folder. This is documentation from 3 other board members about similar incidents. Staff members who were pressured to resign. Vendors who were threatened. A pattern of behavior that violates our code of conduct. Ethan opened the folder, skimmed the contents. His expression was grim. Why didn't anyone bring this forward before? Because Margot is formidable. And because you seemed content to let her run things her way. David's tone was gentle, but lately you've been different. More present. More willing to push back, and that's given others permission to do the same. He nodded to Ava. I don't know what changed, but keep it up. After David left, Ava and Ethan stood in the lobby processing. We have proof, Ava said slowly. Real documentation from multiple sources. The evidence triad. Ethan counted on his fingers. Physical evidence, the emails and documents. Witnesses, Victoria, David, the other board members. Authority validation. David's confirmation that this violates company policy. So it's really over. Not yet. But we're close. They walked out into the afternoon sun. For the first time in days, Ava felt like she could breathe fully. Her phone buzzed. The literary agent. When can we meet to discuss your book deal? I have 3 publishers interested. She showed Ethan the message. He grinned, the real one, unguarded and bright. Looks like Margot's threat didn't work out the way she planned. Looks like it backfired spectacularly. Ava laughed, giddy with relief and exhaustion. What do we do now? Now? Ethan pulled her close, right there on the busy Boston sidewalk. Now we go celebrate the fact that you're about to become a published author, and that we just survived corporate warfare, and that somehow against all odds we're still standing. In that order? In any order you want. They spent the evening at a small restaurant Ava loved, the kind with mismatched chairs and menu items written in chalk. They ordered too much food, drank wine that was probably too cheap for Ethan's usual standards, and talked about everything except Margot and board meetings. What's your book about? Ethan asked. The real version, not the pitch. It's about a woman who spends her whole life trying to belong, who shapes herself to fit whatever space she's in, smaller at work, quieter with family, agreeable with friends, until one day she realizes she's disappeared, and she has to decide if reclaiming herself is worth losing everything she thought she wanted. Does she? Reclaim herself? Yes, Ava smiled. You'll have to read it to find out. I'm going to hold you to that. Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. I'm proud of you. For finishing it. For fighting for it. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. I just got to watch. They walked home slowly, taking the long route through the public garden. The trees were starting to turn, early fall colors catching the streetlight. What happens Monday? Ava asked. At the board meeting? Margot resigns or we vote her out. Either way, she loses her position on the board. And we implement new governance policies, clear boundaries between business and personal life, better oversight on company resources. And after that? After that? Ethan pulled her to a stop under a maple tree, its leaves gold and crimson. After that, I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere nice. Not because we're performing for anyone or proving a point. Just because I want to see you in that burgundy dress again and hear you laugh without worrying about who's watching. That sounds perfect. He kissed her, slow and certain, like he had all the time in the world. When they pulled apart, Ava rested her forehead against his. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for making it an easy choice. They stood there as the city moved around them, 2 people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. Ava's phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Resignation letter drafted. Will submit Sunday evening. MH, she showed Ethan. He read it and exhaled slowly. It's really over. Almost. Ava looked up at him. One more thing to get through. The board meeting. the board meeting. But standing there in the park, Ethan's arms around her and the promise of a book deal in her pocket, Ava felt ready. Ready to stop running, ready to claim her space, ready to see what happened when you stopped fitting yourself into places that were never meant for you and started building something new. If this story reminded you why it's worth fighting for yourself, even when the fight feels impossible, hit subscribe. Because we're about to bring this home. Monday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of October day that felt like summer's last gift before winter settled in for real. Ava met Ethan for coffee at their usual spot before the board meeting. He was in full CEO mode, navy suit, crisp white shirt, the careful composure that came from years of high-stakes negotiations. But when he saw her, something in his expression softened. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to watch a corporate execution." She took a sip of cappuccino. "You?" "Like I should have done this years ago." He glanced at his watch. "The meeting starts at 10. Margot's resignation will be first on the agenda. And if she doesn't follow through, then we present the evidence and let the board decide. Either way, it ends today." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. When it was time to leave, Ethan stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." Ava blinked. "To the board meeting?" "You're the reason I finally had the courage to do this. I want you there." "Ethan, I'm not—" "You don't have to sit in the meeting. But I want you in the building. Close enough that I remember why this matters." Ava took his hand. "Okay." The coal industry's boardroom was exactly what she'd imagined. Polished wood, leather chairs, windows that offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Ava waited in an adjacent conference room while Ethan joined the others inside. Through the glass walls, she could see the board members assembling. David Mercer, looking calm and authoritative. Victoria Ashford, perfectly composed. Gerald Ashford, the man who'd challenged Ethan at the dinner, sitting with his arms crossed. And Margot at the far end of the table, her posture immaculate. The meeting started promptly at 10 a.m. Ava couldn't hear what was being said, but she watched body language like it was a foreign language she was learning to translate. Ethan stood at the head of the table, speaking with quiet authority. Margot's expression was unreadable. She could have been listening to weather reports for all the emotion she showed. Then David Mercer stood, said something that made several board members nod. Victoria pulled out documents, the evidence folder, and passed copies around the table. Margot's composure cracked just slightly. She said something sharp. Ethan responded calmly. Gerald stood, gestured emphatically. Another board member, a woman Ava didn't recognize, raised her hand like she was asking permission to speak. The discussion went on for 40 minutes. Tense, formal, occasionally heated. Ava's coffee went cold as she watched. Finally, Margot stood. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her folder, placed it on the table and said something brief. Then she walked out. The door opened. Margot emerged, her expression controlled but her eyes slightly red. She saw Ava waiting and paused. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two women who'd been fighting over the same man's loyalty, realizing they'd both been fighting the wrong battle. "He chose well," Margot said quietly. "Better than I gave him credit for." Then she walked past, heels clicking against marble, and disappeared into the elevator. Ethan came out 30 seconds later. He looked exhausted and relieved in equal measure. "It's done." She resigned. "Effective immediately. How do you feel?" "Like I just lost a war I didn't know I was fighting." He sat down heavily beside her. The board voted to accept her resignation and implement new governance policies. "We're bringing in an outside consultant to review our ethics protocols and establish clear boundaries between business and personal matters." "That's good, right? It's necessary. Should have been done years ago." He ran a hand through his hair. "David asked me to stay on as CEO. The board voted unanimously in favor." Ava squeezed his hand. "Congratulations. It doesn't feel like a victory, just necessary cleanup." He looked at her. "Thank you for being here. Where else would I be?" They sat there for a while, processing. Then Ethan's assistant knocked on the glass door. "Mr. Cole, there's a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The press is downstairs. Someone tipped them off about Margot's resignation. They're asking for a statement." Ethan and Ava exchanged looks. "You don't have to do this now," Ava said. "Yes, I do. If I wait, the narrative gets away from us. Better to control the story from the start." He stood, straightened his tie. Will you come with me? To talk to the press? To stand beside me while I do? You don't have to say anything. But I'd like them to see that this decision wasn't made in isolation. That I have someone in my life who reminds me what matters. Ava thought about all the times she'd made herself smaller to fit someone else's story. All the times she'd stood in the background while other people took credit. Okay, she said. Let's go. The lobby was chaos. Reporters with cameras, microphones thrust forward, rapid-fire questions overlapping each other. Ethan's security team had set up a small podium area, creating space for a brief statement. Ethan approached calmly, Ava slightly behind him. The questions started immediately. Mr. Cole, can you confirm Margot Hale's resignation? Is this related to the rumors about your relationship? Was she forced out? Ethan raised a hand. The crowd quieted slightly. Good morning. I'll make a brief statement, then take a few questions. He pulled out prepared notes, nothing off the cuff, nothing that could be misinterpreted. Margot Hale has resigned from the Coal Industries Board of Directors, effective immediately. This decision was reached mutually after discussions about the company's future direction and governance structure. What prompted those discussions? Over the past several months, it became clear that we needed to establish stronger boundaries between business operations and personal matters. Margot and I disagreed on how to implement those boundaries. Rather than continue that conflict, she chose to step down. Is it true she tried to pay off your girlfriend? The question came from a young reporter in the back. Bold, direct, exactly what everyone was thinking. Ethan didn't flinch. What's true is that personal relationships should not be subject to corporate interference. Coal Industries is implementing new policies to ensure that never happens again. But did she? I'm not going to discuss private conversations, but I will say this. No one in this company has the right to manipulate or coerce personal decisions. That's not how we operate, and it won't be tolerated going forward. Another reporter. Mr. Cole, can you introduce your companion? Ethan glanced back at Ava. She stepped forward slightly, heart pounding. This is Ava Morgan. She's a writer and someone I care about deeply. Our relationship is personal and will remain that way. But I want to be clear. She has nothing to do with corporate decisions or business operations. She's simply someone who reminds me that there's a world outside this building, and I'm grateful for that. A reporter called out, Miss Morgan, how do you respond to allegations that you're using Mr. Cole for financial gain? Ava felt every camera turn toward her. For a second, she considered deflecting, letting Ethan handle it. Then she remembered her essay, the one about reclaiming space, about refusing to be small. I respond by saying that's not a question I'm required to answer. She said clearly, my relationship with Ethan is personal. My career as a writer is separate. And anyone who can't understand the difference between those things probably shouldn't be reporting on them. A few reporters actually laughed. Ethan smiled, just slightly, but enough that the cameras caught it. Any other questions? He asked, what's next for Coal Industries? Growth, innovation, and a commitment to ethical governance that prioritizes people over politics. We'll be releasing a full statement later this week outlining our new policies and future direction. He thanked them and stepped back. Security guided him and Ava toward the elevators. Behind them, the reporters were already typing. Cameras flashing, the story already being written. In the elevator, Ava exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. That was terrifying. You were perfect. Ethan pulled her close. Seriously, that response about not being required to answer, that's going to be the soundbite everyone remembers. Great, I'm going to be a viral quote. Better than being a manufactured scandal. They returned to Ethan's office. His assistant brought coffee. Real coffee, not the corporate drip, and pastries from the bakery Ava loved. Sarah's been paying attention, Ethan explained, seeing Ava's expression. She knows what you like. They spent the rest of the morning fielding calls. David Mercer calling to confirm the board's support. Victoria Ashford checking that Ethan was okay. 3 major shareholders wanting reassurance that the company was stable. By noon, Ava's head was spinning. Is it always like this? Only when we're managing a crisis. Or preventing one. Ethan set down his phone. But I think we're through the worst of it. His assistant knocked again. Mr. Cole? Judge Carrington is here. He says it's not urgent, but he'd like a word. Ethan's expression flickered with surprise. Send him in. Judge Carrington entered, dressed casually. Khakis and a button-down, no judicial robes. He smiled warmly when he saw them. Ethan, Miss Morgan, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Ethan stood, shook his hand. What brings you here? I saw the press conference. Wanted to check in. He glanced at Ava. And to tell you both that you handled that with remarkable grace. Thank you, Your Honor. Please call me Richard. We're not in court. He sat down, accepting coffee from Sarah. The truth is, I've known Margot for 20 years. Watched her build this company alongside your father, Ethan. But I've also watched her struggle to let go of control. This resignation is probably the best thing for her. And for you. I hope so. I also wanted to say... Richard turned to Ava. That essay you wrote, my wife and I both read it. It moved us. Reminded us of our early years when we were figuring out how to build a life together against everyone's expectations. Ava felt her throat tighten. Thank you. Keep writing. The world needs more honesty like yours. He stood, shook Ethan's hand again. And Ethan, I'm proud of you. Your father would be too. After he left, Ava and Ethan sat in silence. Did that just happen? Ava asked. I think so. Ethan smiled. Sometimes people surprise you. Is it really over? The crisis part? Yes, the cleanup? That'll take weeks. But the immediate threat, Margot, the board, the press, that's handled. Ava leaned back in her chair, feeling exhaustion settle into her bones. What do we do now? Now? Ethan stood, walked around the desk, pulled her to her feet. Now we go home. Order terrible takeout. Watch something mindless on TV. And remember what it feels like to be normal people who aren't managing corporate warfare. That sounds perfect. They left the office together, Ethan's hand warm in hers. The press had dispersed. The lobby was quiet again. Outside, Boston was golden with afternoon light. October leaves scattered across the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a street musician was playing violin, something classical and beautiful. Ava thought about the wrong text that had started everything. The sunflowers and chocolates. The coffee dates and board dinners. The moment she'd decided to stop hiding and start fighting. Hey, Ethan said softly. You okay? Yeah, she smiled up at him. Just thinking about how far we've come from that first night. Best mistake I ever made. Showing up at your door. Best risk I ever took. Letting you in. They walked home through the city. Two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other through everything that followed. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt less like a threat and more like a promise. 6 months later, Ava stood in a small bookstore in Cambridge, watching people browse shelves that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. The sign above the door read Morgan and Cole Books in simple black letters. Inside, the space was warm and cluttered. Mismatched armchairs, floor-to-ceiling shelves built by Ethan and a contractor who'd been patient with their amateur enthusiasm, and a coffee counter that served drinks almost as good as their usual spot. We're out of the literary fiction section books, Ethan called from the back room. I'm restocking. We literally just opened yesterday. How are we already out of stock? Apparently Cambridge has a lot of readers. He emerged carrying a box, grinning. This was your idea. This was our idea, Ava corrected. It had started as a joke, Ethan mentioning his father's old dream of opening a bookstore, Ava saying they should actually do it. Then they'd found the space, small and perfect and available. And before either of them could talk themselves out of it, they'd signed a lease and started building. Ethan still ran Cole Industries. But with new boundaries, no more 18-hour days, no more sacrificing everything for quarterly earnings. He'd promoted 3 vice presidents to handle operations, freeing himself to focus on strategy and, occasionally, stocking bookshelves. Ava's novel had been published in March to unexpected success. Not bestseller list success, but the kind that mattered. Thoughtful reviews, reader emails, book clubs wanting to discuss it. She was already working on the second one, writing in the quiet hours before the store opened. The bell above the door chimed. Claire walked in, carrying a bakery box. Brought you opening week treats. Where do you want them? Coffee counter. You're the best. Ava hugged her. How's the gallery? Chaotic. But good chaotic. Claire had finally opened her own art space. Small, experimental, everything she'd been afraid to try. I'm hosting a show next month. You two should come. We'll be there. More customers filtered in throughout the afternoon. Students looking for textbooks. Professors browsing literary criticism. A mother and daughter shopping for middle-grade novels. Each person who walked through the door felt like proof that this was real, that they'd actually built something that mattered. At 5 p.m., David Mercer arrived with his wife, Eleanor. They'd become unexpected friends, dinners every few weeks, conversations about books and business and the strange overlap between them. "The store looks wonderful," Eleanor said, browsing the memoir section. "I'm buying everything here." "You don't have to do that," Ava protested. "I want to. Support local businesses and all that." She winked. David pulled Ethan aside while Eleanor shopped. Ava couldn't hear their conversation, but she saw Ethan's expression shift, serious, then surprised, then something close to pride. When David left, Ethan came to find her. Cole Industries just landed the Patterson merger. David was on the negotiating team. He said it went through because the Pattersons trust our new ethical standards. They specifically mentioned the governance changes we made after Margot left. Ava squeezed his hand. "That's incredible. It's proof that doing the right thing doesn't have to mean losing everything." He looked around the bookstore. Their bookstore. "We're actually making this work. Did you doubt we would?" "Every day," he smiled. "But in a good way. The kind of doubt that makes you work harder to prove yourself wrong." As the sun set, casting golden light through the front windows, Ava watched Ethan help a customer find a specific poetry collection. He was patient, engaged, genuinely interested in helping someone discover something they'd love. This was the version of him that had shown up at her door with sunflowers, curious, present human. The bell chimed again. Ava looked up, expecting another customer. It was Margot. She stood in the doorway looking smaller somehow, less armored. She wore simple black pants and a cream sweater, her usual diamonds absent. When she saw Ava, she hesitated. "I hope it's all right that I came." Ava's heart was pounding. Of course, Margot walked in slowly, taking in the space. She ran her fingers along a bookshelf, picked up a novel, set it down again. "This is lovely, really lovely. Thank you." Ethan emerged from the back room, stopped when he saw his stepmother. "Margot, Ethan." She managed a small smile. "I heard you'd opened a bookstore. I wanted to see it for myself, and I think your father would have loved it." Her voice caught slightly. "He always said books were the best investment. They paid dividends in wisdom instead of money." Ethan's expression softened. "He did say that." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Margot said, "I owe you both an apology. A real one, not the corporate version I gave the board." "Margot, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She looked between them. "I was wrong. About you, Ava. About trying to control Ethan's life. About believing that protection and manipulation were the same thing. I spent so many years fighting to keep this company alive that I forgot why it mattered. And I hurt people in the process." Ava saw tears forming in Margot's eyes. Actual tears, not the controlled emotion she'd displayed in every other interaction. "I don't expect forgiveness," Margot continued, "but I wanted you to know that I'm working on being better. I started therapy, joined a board for a nonprofit where my controlling tendencies are actually useful, and I'm learning to let go of things that were never mine to control." "That's brave," Ava said quietly. "It's overdue." Margot pulled out a small wrapped package, handed it to Ethan. "This was your father's. I should have given it to you years ago." Ethan unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather journal, worn and filled with handwriting. His father's notes about opening a bookstore. Sketches of layouts, lists of books he wanted to carry. Dreams written in careful detail. "He was planning this when he died," Margot said. "I found it in his office desk. I kept it because I couldn't bear to throw it away, but I couldn't give it to you either. It felt like admitting he'd wanted something beyond the company. That maybe the company wasn't enough." Ethan flipped through pages, his hands shaking slightly. "Thank you. I'm sorry it took me so long." Margot looked around the store again. "But I'm glad you built this. It's what he would have wanted, what he would have been proud of." She left quickly after that, not staying for extended conversation or reconciliation. But something had shifted. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. Space for something new to grow. After she left, Ethan sat down in one of the armchairs reading his father's journal. Ava brought him coffee, sat beside him in silence. He had it all planned out, Ethan said eventually, down to the type of coffee he wanted to serve. "We got that part right then." He smiled, closed the journal carefully. I spent 10 years trying to prove I could succeed at something he'd failed at. Turns out what I really needed was to succeed at the thing he never got to try. Think he'd approve? I think he'd be here every day, recommending books to strangers and arguing about endings. Ethan pulled Ava close. Thank you. For what? For sending a wrong text. For showing up to galas and board dinners. For reminding me that some mistakes are actually destiny wearing a typo. Ava laughed. Did you just quote my essay at me? It was a good line. I'm stealing it. They closed the store at 7 p.m., turning off lights and locking doors. On the sidewalk outside, Ava looked up at the sign. Their names side by side. Equal partners in something that had started as a mistake and become the realest thing in her life. What would you have done? Ethan asked suddenly. What? That night. If I hadn't shown up with sunflowers. Would you have been okay? Ava thought about it honestly. Eventually, yeah. I would have unpacked boxes and finished the novel and built a life that was mine. It just would have taken longer. And it would have been lonelier. Same. He took her hand. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out. They walked home through Cambridge, through streets that had become familiar. Past the coffee shop where they'd had their first real conversation. Past the park where Ethan had told her about his father. Past all the small moments that had added up to something bigger. At Ava's apartment, their apartment now officially as of last month, they found a package waiting. Her second book, the advance copy from her publisher. She opened it carefully, ran her fingers over the cover. The dedication page read, For Ethan, who showed up with sunflowers and taught me that the best stories start with mistakes. You dedicated it to me. You're surprised? I'm honored. He kissed her softly. What's this one about? It's about two people who build something together, who choose each other every day, even when it's hard, who prove that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone worth showing up for. Is it fiction or memoir? Both, neither. Does it matter? Not even a little bit. They spent the evening reading chapters aloud to each other, drinking wine from their usual mismatched mugs, planning the future in the comfortable way of people who'd stopped being afraid of it. Later, as they lay tangled together in bed, Ava's phone buzzed with a notification. Her essay, the one that had started trending months ago, had been selected for a Best Essays anthology. The editor wanted permission to include it. She showed Ethan the email. He read it and grinned. The gift that keeps on giving. Apparently. Ava set the phone aside. I'm going to say yes. Good, that essay deserves to live forever. It's proof that some of the best things in life happen when you're brave enough to take up space or send a text to the wrong number. That too. They fell asleep like that. 2. People who'd stumbled into each other's lives by accident, discovered love in the spaces between performance and reality, and chosen to build something that belonged entirely to them. Outside, Boston continued its evening rhythm, traffic and streetlights and the quiet hum of a city that never fully slept. But inside, in a half-furnished apartment that had finally become home, Ava Morgan and Ethan Cole dreamed of bookstores and second chances and all the beautiful mistakes that look like destiny when you're brave enough to follow them. The truth is simple. We all send wrong texts sometimes. The magic is in who shows up when we do. What would you have done if a stranger showed up at your door with sunflowers and chocolates? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because sometimes the best stories are the ones we almost missed.